This is Meridian Street, one of the most heavily traveled roads in Bellingham. With 3 lanes, it has a capacity to handle many more cars than other roads. But if you've ever driven on it, you've probably experienced what a traffic nightmare it is. And if you try and walk somewhere on it, it's even worse. So why is this road with so much space for cars always full? The answer is a lot deeper than you might expect, and it stems from a pattern of development in the US that affects all of us and has plagued the streets of America for decades. Building this type of infrastructure is not just inefficient, but it's slowly tearing apart the fabric of American society. So is it worth fixing?
President Eisenhower's militant call for a grand plan to provide a modern, controlled access highway system for safe, efficient transcontinental travel led to the passage of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956.
We're learning one person was hit and killed by a car overnight in Tacoma. This happened along East 72nd Street.
Taking you live now to Northgate, where the new Link Light Rail Station is now officially open to the public.
A push to install a new lid over parts of I-5 through downtown Seattle is now gaining support from City Council.
Due to the recent relevance of climate change, environmental impacts have been a large concern with car-centric infrastructure, and people have the right to be worried. Consider the average American car. It produces an average of 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. To put that into perspective, with 300 million registered cars in the United States, cars produce 1 trillion kilograms of carbon dioxide a year, which is 1 followed by 12 zeros. Many people believe that electric cars will be the savior. However, they aren't much better. While they do produce 17 to 30% less emissions than fuel-powered cars, the electricity used to power them is primarily from non-renewable sources, like fossil fuels, which are the same fossil fuels that run fuel-powered cars. And the creation of batteries requires the mining of precious materials, which can be environmentally damaging and release carbons. Those mined metals are also being depleted at a fast rate. An important aspect of cobalt mining that is not widely publicized are the environmental effects, especially in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which produces about 60 to 70% of the cobalt in the world. Batteries are often made with cobalt mined in the DRC with slave-like conditions, and miners receive close to no pay, interacting with the cobalt, which is toxic to touch and breath. This causes accidents, overexertion, exposure to toxic materials, and even violence. Pollution can drift into water sources and contaminate drinking water, while child laborers continue to mine. With the society very heavily dependent on cobalt, it's hard to break the cycle. Electric cars do not come close to solving the problem of car-centric infrastructure. Switching to these vehicles could even increase sprawl. Since people believe that these cars produce zero emissions, they may drive the cars to a greater extent. In the United States, the government has continuously added to the Clean Air Act, which regulates air pollution, including investing in greener industries. However, even this policy may not go far enough. With the effects of climate change, longer droughts and more wildfires can contribute to heightened amounts of air particulates, and transboundary air pollution, meaning air pollution that drifts in or out from nearby countries, is being unregulated. With tens of thousands of people dying from fine particulate pollution per year, the matter becomes essential. We cannot ignore the other threats of car-centric infrastructure. Air pollution and decrease of air quality associate with higher rates of respiratory problems, and the lifestyles that car use promote often link to higher obesity rates and other health issues, including heart disease. More cars also means more accidents. Car-centric infrastructure is causing a myriad of problems that are environmentally related, but that's just the start of it.
A factor making this environmental impact worse is traffic. Cars are big and they take up a lot of space. This commercial was made by Saturn, a car company, and it was intended to show that the company cared about its customers. But the commercial unintentionally highlighted the way that cars are so inefficient. A single lane of traffic can support about 2,000 people per hour, according to the Washington State Department of Transportation themselves. So when a 2-lane freeway gets congested, the solution is to add lanes, right? You would think that adding lanes to highways would make congestion ease, and in the short term it does. But in the long term, adding lanes to highways actually makes the traffic on them worse. It seems counterintuitive, but it's a real thing. It's called induced demand, and it's a super complicated concept in traffic engineering. When lanes are added, it frees up space. This means that people who normally avoid the road start driving it again, and people are more likely to move off of transit in favor of driving. It sounds crazy, but a 2009 study found that the expansion of highways has almost a 1-to-1 ratio with increases of traffic. For example, 10% more space on a freeway almost directly correlates with 10% more traffic. The removal of highways also surprisingly has the reverse effect. In places where highways have been removed, there hasn't been notable changes in traffic. So if adding lanes to freeways just adds traffic, how do we get people around a city? Is there any possible way to move large amounts of people efficiently? Miles, do something funny.
Next stop, North Gate.
That wasn't very funny, Miles. Yes, there is, in fact, a way to move large amounts of people in a city. It takes up a hell of a lot less space, and it moves way more people. You know how we said a freeway lane can move 2,000 people an hour? Well, a light rail line can move 20,000, and it takes up the same amount of space. So why haven't we built this everywhere? It's a good question, and it's one I ask myself a lot as well. An oversimplified answer is that we're trying, but much of it is too little, too late. Seattle's expanding transit more than any other city in the country. Seattle voters passed a bill in 2016 that would add 3 new light rail lines as well as a new fleet of light rail vehicles. And when you go to Seattle, you can see them working on it off of the I-5 corridor. People use the system in its form today. Currently, Seattle only operates 1 light rail line, and it's called the One Line. But it sees an average of 80,000 people ride it a day, which is really large. For reference, Bellingham has a population of around 95,000. This number shows that if you build transit, people are going to ride it. A very easy way to increase ridership on your transit, and something Seattle's done great, is something called transit-oriented development. To see this in action, we actually went to Seattle and checked out where they're redeveloping a parking lot at Northgate Station.
Right now we're at the Northgate Sound Transit Station, it's right over there. But as you can see, we're in the middle of a huge parking lot, and this is not a very economical use of our urban space. So if you look right over here to my left, you can see that they're trying to put in some mixed-use housing, which means that for the top few levels, there's housing, and on the bottom level, there's commercial businesses, which is really nice because it makes it easy to walk to any of your daily necessities. What they're also doing is they're tearing out this parking lot area, and they're turning this area here into more mixed use, which is super good for having a revitalized urban core here.
Thanks, Miles. One thing we forgot to mention in the video is that when this mixed-use development is next to a transit station, walking to that station is a lot easier. Stations in densely populated areas get way more ridership than stations in suburban car-centric areas. Much of the ridership of a transit system comes from walking, which brings us to our next part of the video. This is Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. It's fun because of the rides, and because you get to see Mickey Mouse, and wait 3 f***ing hours to see Elsa with your little cousin, true story. But I think the funniest thing about Disneyland that people don't get is that it's fun because it's a walkable community. You can walk around the park with ease, and it's super great. They even have a train that circles the park and gets people to where they need to go. But that's just Fantasyland. There's no way that that could happen in real life, right? Yeah, it kind of can. Imagine how much Disneyland would suck if you had to drive between attractions on 6-lane, 50-mile-an-hour roads in strip malls. You might think that that analogy is ridiculous, but it's really quite real. And Disneyland is made to simulate an urban walkable community. Speaking of which, let's go to a place that is definitely not an urban walkable community. That's right, we are back at Meridian. So we wanted to test how long it takes to cross the street in these different areas. Just how long it takes to cross the street. So we found 2 Jimmy John's in Bellingham, 1 in Meridian, and 1 downtown. And from there, we just timed the amount of time it takes to cross the street at each of them. It's in a nice, beautiful landscape right here. Yeah, quite pretty, right? I can just imagine living here in a parking lot. I don't know, it's disgusting. Let's do the awesome cross the street challenge now. Let's see how long it takes. So when we were thinking of this idea for crossing the street, we legitimately were not expecting it to take that long at Meridian. This is why we've sped it up. We were expecting it to take maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. It took like 5 or 6. We were waiting at the stoplight alone for like 3.5 minutes. It was ridiculous. And it really goes to show you how we have to stop building this stuff in this country. Because favoring cars over pedestrians like this is just so unsustainable. Made it to Olive Garden.
Why should you outsiders come in here and tell us we're going to have a freeway the way you plan it? Why can't we have our own engineer to check these things? Let him tell us if we need a freeway, and if so, where it should go.
One of the purposes of this meeting is to ensure that equal consideration is given to local needs, because an interstate highway is coming through the community.
The history of car infrastructure has a tragic and downright racist past as well. In 1956, President Eisenhower passed the Federal Aid Highway Act. The goal was to construct 41,000 miles of new highways to connect cities all across America. It did successfully, but at a cost. Over 475,000 people were displaced by the highway construction. This is Robert Moses, one of the most influential urban planners of the 20th century, overseeing all public work projects in New York City. He was also incredibly racist. In the 1959 speech, he said, "Our categorical imperative is action to clear the slums. We cannot let minorities dictate that this century-old chore will be put off another generation or finally abandoned." That he did, under Moses' discretion. The I-95 freeway and the I-278 freeway in New York were paved right through black neighborhoods. This makes sense. As Moses once said, highways should, quote, go right through the cities and not around them. We should be glad that Moses was never a planner in Seattle. However, the same racist highway construction policies were present in every corner of the United States, and Seattle was not innocent. When I-5 was constructed, it was routed through the dense urban core of downtown Seattle, cutting it in half, as well as continuing to bulldoze through the ethnic enclaves of the Chinatown International District. To better understand this, we went to Seattle to explore how I-5 cut through this neighborhood. We also found a cool urban park to film from.
Okay, so we're in the Chinatown International District, and I have to be really loud because the freeway is stupidly loud because of all the cars. But anyway, back when they were building a freeway through the city here, they destroyed a bunch of residences and businesses in the ethnic enclave just to help build a freeway. And there's so many better ways that we could have used this land than just for cars.
Our society today is trained to embrace cars. This is evident when we see the number of teenagers that get their license at age 16, with people expressing their desires for freedom, the freedom to go wherever they want at their own convenience. But as we will discuss later, it can still be possible to go anywhere at a person's leisure with specific methods of city development. Interestingly, CNN recently estimated that there are over 2 billion parking spots in the United States, enough to pave over Connecticut. That's over 6.5 parking spots for each vehicle. Society favors cars, and having an excess of parking spots is a sure way to encourage cars.
Cars themselves aren't the problem, but when they become the only option to get around, and designing in favor of them takes precedent, the downsides start to show themselves. Cars are used more effectively in major cities all around the world. What can be done back home in the States? We explored public transit earlier in this video, which is a great alternative if you want to move a lot of people very efficiently. In cities all across Europe, Asia, and elsewhere, public transport is a more viable option if you want to get somewhere. With greater investment in people-moving transit, roads would be less congested and more friendly to actual people. Bloomberg's City Lab proposed two differences between public transit in the United States and overseas. The first was sprawl. When cities are built outward and they don't stay compact, adding public transit becomes more and more unwieldy. The other difference was trains. While the US's economy was booming from the rise of cars, other countries focused their efforts on these trains. We know that one lane of freeway in Washington can move around 2,000 people every hour. In other locations, cars move only 600 to 1,600 people an hour on average, as reported by the National Association of City Transportation Officials. The same report stated that a bus or rail system implemented on the street could move 10 to 25,000 people every hour, which is a huge increase. Even walking is better for the earth, and it's better for you. But as we demonstrated at Meridian, some infrastructure is not friendly to those on foot. Walking, biking, public transit, none of these are solutions by themselves. There needs to be a huge change in the way Americans think about cars and the way our urban spaces are planned. Mixed-use zoning is a good start to alleviating the issues of car-centric infrastructure. Essentially, the government can delegate certain industries and sectors to certain places locally. This is known as zoning. Mixed use can blend the different uses, including residential, commercial, or industrial. This is seen in places like Fairhaven, where shops are located on lower floors and residential areas are on upper floors. We can discourage the use of cars by reducing parking slots and creating fees for parking. In countries like Germany, bikes are given right-of-way over cars on roads, and public transportation is taking its place. As shown in the graph on screen, car production and sales have decreased sharply since these developments. Like we mentioned earlier, public transportation must become ideal. It needs to be flexible, accessible, efficient, safe, effective, and cheap. Coupled with transit-oriented development, like we saw near the light rail station in Seattle, smarter development is a great place to start.
To conclude, yes, it's worth fixing our cities for the good of the people. It's important to note that we don't hate cars. What we don't like is the way that we build around them in the US. There's some significant problems with it, and they need to change. We've seen the health effects, environmental impacts, and traffic which condemn cars. Our society is deeply rooted in the car culture, but step by step we can continue to unbind ourselves from the consequences of the existing infrastructure and start on a path to a greener, healthier, and sustainable future. Thank you.
Yeah, huh? You want to go in there? What's in there? Oh.